There is a moment just before you fall asleep where your body does something strange. Your brain sends a signal that temporarily paralyzes your voluntary muscles, locks them, so that when you dream of running, you don't actually run. A protective mechanism. It makes sense. Except sometimes it misfires. Sometimes you wake up, mind surfacing into consciousness, but the paralysis hasn't lifted yet. You are awake. You can feel the weight of the sheets, the temperature of the room, the specific quality of the darkness, and you cannot move. And then, in roughly 1 in 5 of these episodes, you see something, hear something, feel something in the room with you. A presence at the edge of the bed, a weight on your chest, a shape in the corner that you know with absolute certainty is watching you. This experience has been recorded in almost every culture on Earth. The English called it the old hag. The Danes called it the mare. In Brazil, it's a pisadeira. In China, the ghost pressing down. In Japan, they have a name for it that translates roughly as the crushing demon. And the mythology the Japanese built around this experience is one of the most elaborate, most psychologically sophisticated, and most genuinely disturbing in the world. Today we're talking about the Kanashibari and the spirit behind it. The word Kanashibari breaks down into 2 kanji. Kana, metal, and shibari, binding, together, bound in metal, frozen. In Japanese folk tradition, Kanashibari is not a medical condition. It is something done to you by a spirit. The experience appears in Edo period literature, in ghost stories, in advice given to travelers about sleeping safely in unfamiliar places. It was understood not as a brain malfunction, but as a seam in consciousness, a moment where the boundary between the waking world and whatever lies on the other side becomes dangerously thin. What is interesting is what this framing does to the experience. If you understand it medically, REM, atonia, bleed through, a neurological glitch, it is frightening but containable. You wait for the paralysis to pass. You tell yourself it isn't real. If you understand it mythologically, if your framework is that something has pinned you to the bed and will not let you move, the experience is something else entirely. The mythology doesn't just describe the experience, it shapes it. It gives the darkness in the corner a weight and an intention. And that is far harder to shake than a neurological explanation. The entity most commonly associated with Kanashibari is the Kanashibari no Rei, the binding spirit. To understand it, you need to understand how Japanese supernatural taxonomy works, because it is far more complex than the Western good/evil binary. Japanese folk religion, a layered blend of Shinto animism, Buddhist cosmology, and centuries of regional tradition, does not draw a clean line between the living and the dead, between the natural and the supernatural. Everything has the potential for spirit. Old objects acquire spirits. Places where strong emotions occurred become charged with residue. The dead do not always leave cleanly. Those who die with strong attachments, unresolved grief, or violent emotion can linger. And lingering spirits are not always malevolent. They're often simply persistent, caught. The Kanashibari is typically the spirit of someone who died in extreme emotional disturbance, rage, grief, obsessive attachment, and has not moved on. The binding it performs is not sadistic, it is reflexive. The spirit is drawn to sleeping people because sleep is when the human boundary between the waking and spirit world is most permeable. It presses down not out of hatred, but out of need. The need for contact, for acknowledgement, for something it can no longer articulate. It wants to be seen. This is a detail that separates Japanese sleep paralysis mythology from most Western equivalents. The old hag is malevolent. She sits on your chest to harm you, to steal your breath. Western traditions are fundamentally about attack. The Kanashibari is not attacking you. It is reaching out. The horror in the Japanese framing is not that something wants to hurt you. It is that something is so lonely, so unable to leave, that it comes to the room of a sleeping stranger and holds them still, just to have a moment of contact with the living world. That is a different kind of dread, and in some ways a much deeper one. The specific folklore surrounding Kanashibari is elaborate and regional, varying across different parts of Japan, but several elements appear consistently. The first is the position. The spirit approaches from the foot of the bed upward, or presses down from above onto the chest. The weight on the chest is a central physical sensation of sleep paralysis cross-culturally, and the Japanese tradition accounts for it directly. People wake with sore muscles, as if something genuinely pressed down through the night. The second is the eyes. Where the spirit is seen, it looks directly at the person, not at the room, at you specifically, at your face. No ambiguity about whether it knows you are there. The third is sound. Many accounts include an auditory component, whispering, a name, or a low resonant note that you feel in your sternum before your ears register it. Often described as coming from just beside the ear or from inside the head. The fourth and most unsettling is duration. Standard sleep paralysis lasts seconds to a few minutes, but the folklore accounts feature episodes that stretch far longer. And the consistent quality of these extended experiences is not terror exactly, but endurance. You are pinned, you cannot call out. The presence simply waits with you, neither escalating nor retreating. Patient in the way that things with no particular relationship to time are patient. There is a specific sub-tradition within Kanashibari folklore worth dwelling on, because it is one of the stranger, culturally specific details in the accounts. In certain older regional traditions, there is a protocol for what to do when you wake paralyzed and find the spirit present. Not a banishing ritual, not a prayer for protection, a bow. If you can move any part of your body, even slightly, even just a tilt of the head, you acknowledge the spirit with the smallest possible gesture of respect, not submission, acknowledgement. The logic. The Kanashibari no is not malevolent, but it is in pain. It is bound to the world by something unresolved. Treating it with contempt, trying to ignore it, responding with pure terror, reinforces its inability to move on. But acknowledging it, even from a position of helplessness, is a form of recognition. You say in the language of gesture, "I know you are here. I know you were a person. I know you are in pain." In the tradition, this acknowledgement is sometimes enough. The pressure lifts. The spirit withdraws. Not because it was defeated, it cannot be defeated, but because it received the smallest possible unit of what it came looking for. Something has seen it. This detail reframes the entire experience in a way that almost nothing else in supernatural folklore does. The prescribed response to a terrifying encounter is not courage, not force, not sacred protection. It is compassion. Even paralyzed, even terrified, even unable to do anything else, you bow. Sleep paralysis is well documented. During REM sleep, the brainstem suppresses motor activity to prevent physically acting out dreams. Occasionally, during the transition in and out of sleep, this suppression bleeds into waking consciousness. The result is paralysis lasting seconds to 2 minutes, accompanied by hypnagogic hallucinations, sensory experiences generated by a brain caught between dreaming and waking, that tend to feature a threatening presence. The presence is not random. The hallucinated figures in sleep paralysis episodes worldwide cluster around the same archetypes: intruder, incubus, demonic weight. The part of the brain most active during the episode is the amygdala, the threat detection center. It generates the most plausible explanation for the inexplicable paralysis. Something is doing this to you. The shape in the corner is your own amygdala, trying to save you from something that isn't there. That's the science, and it is accurate. But here is what I find genuinely interesting. The science explains the mechanism. It does not explain the experience in any emotionally meaningful sense. Knowing that your amygdala is generating a threat response does not make the weight on your chest lighter. The terror is identical whether you call it sleep paralysis or Kanashibari. What the mythology does, what the Kanashibari no does, is give the experience a moral framework. It says, this thing in the room is a residue of someone who suffered, someone who died with something unfinished. And the correct response is not to manage it or medicate it away. It is to meet it with presence. The bow is the acknowledgement that even in the most frightening moment, even pinned to your bed in the dark, the appropriate response to suffering is not to look away. That's not neuroscience. But it's not nothing. Japanese folklore is full of spirits that linger because of unresolved attachment to a place, a person, a grief, an injustice. The onryo, the vengeful spirit, the yurei, the ghost with unfinished business, the gaki, the hungry ghost of Buddhist tradition, forever consuming and never satisfied. The Kanashibari no Rei belongs to this family, but it is the most passive of them. It doesn't destroy, it doesn't pursue. It just comes to the room of a sleeping person and holds them still for a moment, waiting, needing something it can no longer name. Sleep paralysis is still reported at notably high rates in Japan, higher in some studies than in equivalent Western populations. Researchers have tentatively linked this to cultural expectation. The detailed, pre-existing narrative Japanese people bring to the experience shapes the experience itself. The mythology and the episode reinforce each other. But I think something deeper is also happening. The Kanashibari no Rei is a figure for something true that the scientific account doesn't fully contain. The idea that loneliness, the particular loneliness of someone who died without resolution, without being seen, has weight, has presence, can press down on you in the dark. Most of us will go our entire lives without fully seeing the lonely people around us, without acknowledging the ones who are pinned in their own way to a state they can't escape. The spirit that watches you sleep, in the Japanese tradition, is the myth's way of making that invisible weight literal. You wake up. Something is in the room. You cannot move. And the correct response, the thing the tradition asks of you, is to see it. The Japanese spirit that watches you sleep is in the end a story about visibility, about the cost of being unseen, about what accumulates when grief and attachment and unfinished emotion have nowhere to go. It is also a story about what happens in the room when your sleeping brain misfires, and how the story you bring to that experience shapes what the experience becomes. Both of those things are true. They don't cancel each other out. Thanks for watching.